Hello, Uta Hagen here of Trans Widow, Uta Hagen YouTube channel and WordPress blog, utahagengrasswidow.wordpress.com. It is early spring, I know, because the snowdrops have started blooming. You can see how they open up from a vertical bulb, and then when they're fully open, they drop and hang down. And don't they have a sweet little green center? We also have this rescued daffodil bulb, which had been half eaten by some critter, a woodchuck or a squirrel perhaps. And it does have a bud, but as I thought might happen, it is growing more slowly than my others. And of course, I've got my stalwart orchid that keeps on blooming, and it does have buds on it that are getting bigger and bigger. Now, uh, what I'm happy to report on is the little bit fracturing of the cracked globe, the cracked glass globe of gender ideology in the Netherlands. And this is significant because the 2011 study by Anna Laura uh, De Vries, Cohen, Kettenis, and Steensma. Those are the originators of the pharmaceutical funded, from Ferring Pharma, funded study with only 70 subjects to begin with, who were specially selected, and it's very, very different from all the rest of the kids who are going into these clinics with cross-sex ideation. And then it dropped down to 55, and then 2 died, so it was 53, and then only 33 answered their exit survey, and this was published in 2011, and I believe that they republished something saying the same thing in 2017. And it's become known, this practice of the puberty blockers, which are gonadatrophin agonists, gonads being our sex organs, which produce the higher level of sex hormones in adolescence, in puberty. So those puberty blockers are used to supposedly prevent you from going through, in quotes, the wrong puberty when you have cross-sex ideation, which could actually be something that you're expressing because you've had experiences of abuse, or you had some mixed up experience of pornography, or you've been manipulated by adults, you've been watching too much anime, all this kind of stuff. And apparently, none of these influences from outside were explored at all when they did this study. But of course, they wanted to produce something favorable to sell those drugs because it was all funded by a pharmaceuticals company, Ferring, Ferring. So now there are 2 commentators in particular, Gilles Smits and Patrick van Krunkelsven, who are, first one, Smits is a medical ethics writer, and Patrick van Krunkelsven is an endocrinologist. And they are taking note of all the problems with these so-called foundational studies that promote this idea that we have to automatically affirm a child, a teenager, a 12-year-old, an 11-year-old, etc., who is saying, I think I'm born in the wrong body, and who is going through a period of cross-sex ideation. So what Smits and van Krunkelsven are criticizing from the Steensma, DeVries, and Cohen-Ketenis publications are regarding the Hippocratic Oath, first, do no harm. And they're just saying there is, number one, a paucity of evidence, not enough evidence. For example, males were only followed up for 3.5 years, natal males. Natal females were only followed up for 2.3 years, 2.33 years. Another example of how even in some, research like this, they don't have the same follow-up for females as for males. And what detransitioners tell us, of course, is that it takes until about 7 to 10 years to realize that you've put yourself through all of these surgeries so that you can so-called pass. All of the DeVries, Steensma, and Cohen-Ketenis research is all in the service of so-called passing as the opposite sex. So the second issue, there are 5 main issues that are noted with the Dutch research that is now the foundation for what's called the Dutch protocols, which is what is recommended by WPATH and is currently being promoted by the World Health Organization, and etc. Also, there is no distinction between childhood and adolescent onset. As a non-believer in this kind of affirmation treatment, I don't really see much of a difference. I think wherever you are at, the connection between mind and body, wherever you are at, if you're a 5-year-old child, if you're an adolescent, you need some help. It needs to be recognized as an ideation and a psychiatric illness, which we should not make irreversible changes to the body in response to it. The third is there's the claim that they say is false, that 98% of those who go on puberty blockers then continue to, if they're a girl, be put on testosterone, if they're a boy, to be put on estrogen. And they are saying, we don't really know that. That's not being reported accurately. There are more, they're making the claim, of these adolescent patients who then just stop doing the puberty blockers. And often they have to stop doing them because it's causing them some damage. And number 4, puberty blockers actually impede having time to reflect about, do I want to grow up and be the sex that I was born? Yeah. And so what I'm saying is, it looks like these researchers are beginning to say the gonadatrophin agonists prevent good thinking, interfere with the logical thought process, and therefore no youth who have cross-sex ideation can be making a choice with informed consent, because their actual mental functioning is being damaged by the puberty blockers. And I'll go into what Dr. Sallie Baxendale says about this in just a few seconds. And so the 5th point that Schmids and Van Krunkselven make is they are saying we need to reform the Dutch gender care to align with Sweden and Finland, who have stopped giving puberty blockers. They have stopped giving wrong sex hormones. They have stopped all of these surgeries because they are more accurately following the detransitioners and seeing that this does not improve your life and make you happier. So Dr. Sallie Baxendale is a British neuropsychologist. Her main field of study is surgery for epilepsy. So she is really deeply involved in the study of the brain. And she tells us that the adult brain contains trillions of synaptic connections. And we have in our development pre-programmed times for our brain to have specific kind of development, such as an amazing plasticity for acquiring language from age 0 to 3. And if children are in a bilingual environment, they can learn the two languages without accent in either language. Then that kind of closes that huge growth of linguistic capacity that the brain is going through in early childhood closes, and you have to study a lot harder, and you might not be able to give up your accent or to overcome your accent in another language if you are learning it after that early period. By the same token, there is a critical time of neural development in adolescence. And the wash of the pubertal hormones of your natal body, estrogen type hormones for girls and testosterone for boys, not only create the sex trait changes, but there is also an increase in myelin production, and that is sort of like the coating around these synapses, and a capacity for higher critical thinking is part of this. And there is apparently sort of a pruning of extraneous connections. Then the connections between the frontal lobe and the amygdala, and there was another part of the brain, also become stronger from going through normal puberty. This all leads to a higher capacity for executive functioning, making decisions about how do I get a certain task done, or how do I learn something? What should I do first? How do I synthesize information and put various facts together to give me an understanding of a whole? How do I handle complexity, basically? So there is a real vulnerability if you take that away through gonadatrophin agonists, which are puberty blockers. And animal studies show very detrimental effects, says Dr. Baxendale, of this puberty suppression. They did something with sheep, and the sheep didn't have spatial memory. The sheep that had been affected this way didn't do well on various cognitive tasks. And there is not a catch-up after it's ceased. And so even just a few months or years of puberty blockers, which are done by, I think they insert things into the kids, or they, it's really crazy Dr. Frankenstein kind of stuff that they're doing. So what this researcher, Baxendale, is saying is, I think it's a medical scandal. And she says that in the animal studies, a catch-up time was not observed when the puberty blockers were ceased. So uh, this is really, really important information, and we are not going to find it to be published and to be reported on in the mainstream media. That is why I present it here, and it's important to, pass on these facts that you are learning, synthesizing, and understanding through what I'm presenting here. Again, I suggest go to segm.org and read these things yourself. Um, okay, and so there are cracks in the facade of the Dutch research that led to what is known as the Dutch protocols. They are based on bad research. It's just, it doesn't have enough subjects. They have a very, very biased and captured mindset. And, when you read these studies, they will say cis, this, meaning natal sex, and they will say trans women, and you're supposed to just know that that means men who ideate a female persona. There's a whole bunch of interpretation. Speaking of learning a language, it's just all of these studies, even when they are publishing the surprise results that the so-called affirmative care is doing harm, not good. They still use captured language to discuss it. And so we have to look at all of this and keep on checking back with organizations like Society for Evidence-Based Gender Medicine, segm.org, so that we have the facts and we can send people who think that they know it all. We can send them to the places where they will find the facts. Just one last little tidbit from a conversation I had with an old friend that I've known for more than 10 years, who is a lesbian. She's about my age. And I was explaining all of these new facts and things, and she had told me that in this lesbian outing group there was some dude who dresses way weird, not like any of the rest of them, wears high heels on a hike and this kind of thing, and also, gets involved telling them, oversharing too much about his mental health problems and wants to stay over at somebody's house, all this kind of nonsense. And so I figured, I should just let her know that, yeah, your reaction to this usurping man going into your group of lesbians who just want to, have your own social group based on your sexual orientation and your sex, I wanted to validate her feelings about that. However, she is only listening to NPR, PBS, the captured reporting on all of these things. And she said to me at a certain point, she didn't question any of the facts and any of the science that I'm presenting to her. But at a certain point, she said, well, this must take hours and hours of your time. You're spending so much of your time on this. And I think then what that reflects is this attitude of, and it doesn't affect that many people. It's like 0.01% of society or something. And we just, had bad luck, and this guy, inserted himself into our group. Well, this is just a typical response that someone who has that shell of woke ideology built around themselves, they have to find some objection. And it was really interesting because I think I was really giving her freedom to think her thoughts. And I decided not to take offense at this, business about, well, you're taking so much time. I said, look, I'm collecting the only data in the world on trans widows. And I have data on the 34 children and some of their trauma, who are the 34 children of the 57 trans widows. This is important. Of course, I spend hours on it. This was take 3 of this information. Please like, subscribe. We have almost 2,000. I feel like that's a milestone. And we have, I think, over 180,000 views in the lifetime of the channel. So